I'm Ray Dalio, and 3 months ago, I did something that shocked Wall Street. I liquidated $47 billion in assets. Everything. Stocks, bonds, real estate, even gold. My team thought I'd lost my mind. My investors were furious, but I wasn't panicking. I was preparing. Because my system detected a pattern that's appeared only twice in the last century. 1929 and 1939, and both times it led to complete economic devastation. Here's why I'm betting against everything and why you should be terrified of what's coming next. This isn't about market corrections or temporary downturns. This is about the collapse of the global financial system as we know it. And it starts in exactly 18 months. Let me show you what I'm seeing that nobody else is talking about. Because understanding this pattern might be the difference between financial survival and complete ruin. The signs are everywhere, but most people are looking in the wrong direction. They're watching inflation numbers and employment rates. I'm watching something much more dangerous, something that's been building for 15 years and it's about to explode. In September 2023, I called an emergency meeting. Not for my investors, not for the media, for my family. I told them to prepare for the worst economic period in their lifetimes. My wife thought I was being dramatic. My children rolled their eyes. But I wasn't being emotional. I was being mathematical. The debt cycle that started in 2008 is reaching its terminal phase, and when it breaks, it won't just crash markets, it will reshape civilization. You see, most people think 2008 was the crisis. They're wrong. 2008 was just the beginning. What we're facing now is the completion of a cycle that's been 80 years in the making. I've spent 50 years studying these patterns. Empires rise, empires fall. Currencies strengthen, currencies collapse. And right now, we're watching the end of the American economic empire in real time. The dollar's dominance is ending. The debt burden is unsustainable. And the social contract that holds society together is fracturing. But here's what terrifies me most. This time, there's no backup system, no safe haven, no country strong enough to catch the world when America falls. When the Roman Empire collapsed, Europe rose. When Britain declined, America took over. But when America collapses economically, there's nowhere for global wealth to hide. China isn't ready. Europe is fragmenting. And the systems we've relied on for 80 years are about to prove inadequate for what's coming. I liquidated everything because holding traditional assets in what's about to happen is like trying to preserve ice in a furnace. It doesn't matter how good your ice is, it's going to melt. But liquidating was just step one. Step two is positioning for what comes after the collapse. Because there will be an after, there always is, but only for those who see it coming and position accordingly. Let me walk you through exactly what I'm seeing. There are signals that convinced me to bet against everything, and more importantly, what I'm doing to not just survive what's coming, but to profit from it. Because chaos, as devastating as it is, always creates opportunities for those who understand the patterns. By the end of this conversation, you'll know three things. First, the exact timeline and phases of the economic collapse. Second, how to protect and grow your wealth during the chaos. Third, how to become wealthy in the new world order that emerges after the collapse. First signal, the debt-death spiral. Right now, the U.S. government pays more in interest on its debt than it spends on national defense. Let that sink in. We're spending more money servicing old debt than protecting the country. This is mathematically unsustainable. Every dollar of new debt requires more dollars of future debt to service it. It's a compound interest nightmare working in reverse, and it accelerates every year. By 2026, interest payments alone will consume 30% of all tax revenue. By 2028, it could be 50%. At that point, the government has three choices: default on the debt and crash the global financial system, print money so fast that the dollar becomes worthless, or implement austerity measures so severe that society breaks down. None of these options end well. But here's the terrifying part. The government will probably try all three simultaneously, making everything worse. Let me give you the exact numbers that made me liquidate everything. U.S. national debt is $33 trillion. Annual interest payments are $1.1 trillion. That's more than we spend on defense, education, and infrastructure combined. But here's what nobody talks about. 40% of that debt needs to be refinanced in the next 4 years. At current interest rates, that means interest payments will double to $2.2 trillion annually. That's 40% of all federal revenue just to service debt. No country in history has survived that level of debt service, not one. When I ran these numbers through my models, every scenario ended the same way. Systemic collapse within 24 months. Second signal, the everything bubble is reaching maximum inflation. Stocks trading at 30 times earnings. Real estate prices that require 2 full-time incomes to afford a basic home. Art, wine, collectibles, even digital pictures selling for millions. This isn't prosperity. This is desperation. When everything is expensive, nothing has real value. It means too much money is chasing too few productive assets. And that money has to go somewhere when reality hits. The problem is, there's nowhere for it to go, because the alternative investments are just as overpriced as the traditional ones. But here's what scared me into action. My wealth management team showed me a chart. Every asset class in America is now in the top 5% of its historical valuation range. Stocks, bonds, real estate, commodities, even farmland. This has never happened before in recorded history. Never. When everything is expensive simultaneously, it means the currency itself is losing value. And when a reserve currency loses value, the entire global system breaks down. That's exactly what happened to the British pound in 1967. And exactly what's happening to the dollar today. Third signal, and this is the one that made me liquidate everything. Social cohesion is collapsing. You can't have a stable economy without a stable society. And American society is fracturing along every possible line. Political, racial, generational, economic. We're not disagreeing anymore. We're at war with ourselves. And historically, internal conflict always precedes economic collapse. Always. Look at any empire that's fallen. Rome, Spain, Britain. The pattern is identical. First, massive debt accumulation. Second, currency debasement. Third, social division. Fourth, political paralysis. Fifth, economic collapse. We're currently at stage 4, approaching stage 5. And once we cross that line, there's no going back without massive structural change. I've studied 47 empire collapses throughout history. The social disintegration phase always lasts 3 to 5 years before economic collapse. We started this phase in 2020. That puts the collapse window between 2023 and 2025. We're in it right now. But most people can't see it because they're focused on symptoms instead of systems. They see inflation and think it's temporary. They see market volatility and think it's normal. They see political chaos and think it's just bad leadership. They don't understand that these are all symptoms of a system in terminal decline. Fourth signal, the global reserve currency system is breaking down. For 50 years, the world has used dollars for international trade. Oil, gold, commodities, everything priced in dollars. This gave America enormous power. We could print money and export our inflation to the rest of the world. But that system is ending. China and Russia are trading in their own currencies. Saudi Arabia is accepting yuan for oil. The European Union is pushing for euro-denominated trade. And central banks worldwide are reducing their dollar reserves. When the dollar loses its reserve status, and America will have to live within its means for the first time since 1971. That means massive cuts in government spending, huge increases in taxes, or hyperinflation. None of these are politically acceptable, but they're mathematically inevitable. Let me share something that will shock you. In 2022, dollar-denominated international reserves fell to their lowest level since 1995. Central banks sold $1.1 trillion in U.S. Treasury bonds, the biggest sell-off in history. Why? Because they see what I see. The dollar's days as the global reserve currency are numbered, and when it falls, it will fall fast, just like the British pound fell from 1967 to 1976. 9 years of steady decline that ended with Britain begging the IMF for a bailout. That's America's future, and it starts in 2025. Fifth signal, and this one keeps me awake at night, the derivative bomb is about to explode. Global derivatives market is $600 trillion. That's 8 times global GDP. These are complex financial instruments that most people don't understand. But they're all interconnected. When one fails, they all fail. Like dominoes. In 2008, derivatives caused the financial crisis, but the derivatives market was only 400 trillion then. Now it's 600 trillion, 50% bigger. And the underlying economic fundamentals are much worse than 2008. Higher debt levels, lower growth rates, more political instability. When this derivatives bubble pops, and it won't just crash banks. It will destroy entire countries. The European banking system will collapse first, then Japan, then the United States, and there's no central bank powerful enough to stop it. Not the Federal Reserve, not the European Central Bank, not the Bank of Japan. Because they're all part of the same interconnected system. When one falls, they all fall. And now, here's what I'm doing about it. My positioning strategy for the economic collapse. This isn't financial advice. This is what I personally am doing with my own money, and why I liquidated $47 billion to implement this strategy. First, I'm holding massive amounts of cash. I know, cash seems stupid when inflation is high, but cash becomes king when everything else crashes. In 2008, the richest people weren't those who avoided losses. They were those who had cash to buy assets when everyone else was forced to sell. I'm anticipating the same dynamic, but much larger. When stocks crash 70%, real estate falls 50%, and bonds become worthless, having cash means having options. But not just any cash. I'm holding dollars, euros, yen, and Swiss francs. Because when the global monetary system breaks down, you want currency diversification. No single currency will be safe, but some will be safer than others. And cash in multiple currencies gives you maximum flexibility. Second, I'm buying productive assets outside the U.S. financial system, farmland in New Zealand, energy infrastructure in Canada, manufacturing facilities in Southeast Asia, water rights in South America, mining operations in Australia, assets that produce real value regardless of what happens to paper currencies. The key is geographic diversification. Don't put all your eggs in the American basket when the American basket is cracking. I've moved 60% of my assets outside the United States. Not because I hate America, because I understand mathematical reality. America represents 30% of global GDP, but holds 60% of global debt. That's unsustainable. And when it corrects, it will correct violently. Third, I'm investing in chaos hedges, gold, silver, Bitcoin, commodities, things that historically hold value when traditional systems break down. I'm not a gold bug or a crypto fanatic, I'm a realist. And the reality is that when people lose faith in governments and currencies, they turn to alternative stores of value. But here's what most people get wrong about gold and Bitcoin. They think these assets will make them rich. They won't. They're insurance policies, not investments. Their job is to preserve purchasing power when everything else collapses. Not to create wealth. Wealth creation comes later, during the rebuilding phase. But you have to survive the collapse first, and that requires holding assets that maintain value when paper money becomes worthless. Fourth, I'm building optionality. Citizenship in multiple countries, bank accounts in multiple currencies, skills that are valuable regardless of economic conditions, the ability to relocate quickly if necessary. This isn't paranoia. This is prudent planning for an uncertain future. I now hold passports for 4 different countries: United States, New Zealand, Singapore, and Switzerland. Why? Because when economic collapse hits, it often comes with political instability. And political instability can lead to restrictions on capital movement, or worse, confiscation of private wealth. It's happened before. In 1933, Roosevelt banned private gold ownership in America. In 1966, Johnson imposed restrictions on overseas investments. In 1971, Nixon ended dollar convertibility to gold, emergency measures during economic crises. And we're heading into the biggest economic crisis since the Great Depression. Having multiple citizenships gives you options. If one government becomes hostile to wealth, you can move to another. But here's the most important part of my strategy. I'm preparing for the recovery. Because there will be one. Empires fall, but civilization continues, and the people who position themselves correctly during the collapse become the wealth builders of the next era. The opportunities coming in the next decade will be unlike anything we've seen since World War II. Entire industries will be restructured, new technologies will emerge, political systems will be redesigned, and those who understand the transition will profit enormously from it. Let me share my timeline for what's coming. And remember, I've been studying economic cycles for 50 years. This isn't speculation. This is pattern recognition. Phase 1, 2024 to early 2025. The slow motion crash. Markets will be volatile but won't collapse yet. The government will keep printing money to support asset prices. Inflation will remain high but manageable. This is the time to position yourself, to move money out of vulnerable assets and into protective ones. Most people will ignore the warning signs because the crisis hasn't hit yet. Don't be most people. This phase is already underway. Regional bank failures, commercial real estate collapse, corporate debt defaults. These are early warning signs that most people dismiss as isolated incidents. They're not isolated, they're connected, and they're accelerating. Phase 2, mid-2025 to 2027, the cascade failure. Something will trigger the collapse. Maybe a major bank failure. Maybe a sovereign debt crisis. Maybe a geopolitical shock. It doesn't matter what the trigger is. What matters is that the system is so fragile that any shock can bring it down. Stock markets will fall 60 to 80%. Real estate will crash in most areas. The dollar will lose significant value against other currencies. Unemployment will spike to 15 to 20%. Social unrest will increase dramatically. This is when having cash and international diversification becomes critical. Because during this phase, capital controls will be implemented. The government will restrict your ability to move money overseas. They'll do it in the name of financial stability. But it's really about keeping wealth trapped in the collapsing system. Phase 3, 2027 to 2030, the restructuring. This is when the new economic order emerges, new monetary systems, new trade relationships, new political alignments, massive wealth transfer from unprepared to prepared. This is also when the greatest opportunities emerge. Real estate at 20 cents on the dollar, stocks of solid companies trading for nothing, entire industries available for acquisition. But only if you survived phases 1 and 2 with capital intact. Most people focus on avoiding the crash. Smart people focus on profiting from the recovery. Here's what most people don't understand about economic collapses. They're not random, they're cyclical. They happen every 75 to 80 years like clockwork. 1789. French Revolution and economic collapse, 1860s, American Civil War and monetary crisis, 1930s, Great Depression and World War II, 2010s to 2020s, global debt crisis and social upheaval. The pattern is always the same: massive debt accumulation, currency debasement, social division, political paralysis, economic collapse, then restructuring and renewal. We're currently in the collapse phase. The restructuring is coming. And those who understand the pattern will position themselves to benefit from both the destruction and the renewal. But here's what's different this time: the scale. Previous collapses were regional. This one is global. Previous collapses had escape valves. This one doesn't. When America crashes, there's no other economy large enough to absorb the displaced capital. When the dollar fails, there's no obvious replacement currency ready to take over. This means the collapse will be deeper and longer than anything in modern history. But it also means the recovery will create wealth opportunities unlike anything we've ever seen. Imagine buying Manhattan real estate after the 1929 crash. Imagine investing in American companies after World War II. Imagine acquiring assets during the collapse of the Soviet Union. Now, multiply those opportunities by 10. That's what's coming for those who position themselves correctly. But you have to survive the collapse first, and survival requires preparation, not hope, not wishful thinking, not trusting that someone else will fix the problems. Actual preparation. Here's my personal survival checklist. I'm sharing this not as advice, but as transparency about how I'm positioning for what's coming. Financial preparation: 6 months of expenses in cash, precious metals equal to 10% of net worth. Real estate outside major U.S. cities, international investments in multiple currencies, skills that remain valuable during economic turmoil, geographic preparation, valid passport with multiple country options, residence established in at least 2 countries, local connections and resources outside the United States, understanding of different tax and legal systems, physical preparation, food storage for 6 months minimum, water purification and storage capabilities, basic medical supplies and medications, energy independence options including solar panels and generators, self-defense capabilities and training. This might sound extreme to some people, but extreme times require extreme preparation. And these are extreme times. The debt levels are extreme. The asset bubbles are extreme. The social divisions are extreme. The political dysfunction is extreme. Extreme problems require extreme solutions, and the most extreme solution is being prepared when everyone else isn't. Here's my final message to you. I'm not trying to scare you. Fear is paralyzing. I'm trying to wake you up, because awareness creates options, and options create freedom. The next 5 years will separate the prepared from the unprepared, the adaptable from the rigid, the realistic from the optimistic. You get to choose which category you're in. But you have to choose now, because once the collapse begins, your choices become much more limited and much more expensive. The people who survive and thrive through the coming economic transformation won't be the smartest or the luckiest. They'll be the ones who saw it coming and acted accordingly. The ones who prepared when preparation was still possible. The ones who positioned themselves for both survival and opportunity. I've liquidated $47 billion in assets because I see what's coming. The question is, do you see it too? And more importantly, are you going to do something about it? The choice is yours, but choose quickly, because time is running out faster than most people realize. And when the collapse comes, and it will come, there will be 2 types of people: those who prepared and those who wished they had. Don't be in the second group.